The perpetual magnetic storms painted the sky in shades of purple and blue as Roger Kincaid adjusted his formal diplomat's collar for the fifth time. The ceremonial platform, hastily constructed at the edge of the human settlement on this particular skyland, offered a breathtaking view of the vast emptiness below, a sight that made his stomach churn. Beyond the platform's edge, the floating archipelago of the Sky Riders' territory loomed in the distance, jagged mountains and floating rock formations creating a formidable natural fortress. Remember, these negotiations represent our third attempt at peace in 2 generations. Ambassador Coleman's voice crackled through his earpiece. The council expects results this time, Kincaid. Roger nodded, though his superior couldn't see him. I understand the stakes, Ambassador. Good, because your predecessor's failure cost us 3 outposts and 17 lives. The reminder was unnecessary. Roger had spent months studying the failed diplomatic missions, learning from their mistakes, preparing arguments that might finally break through centuries of mistrust. At 32, he was young for such a critical assignment, but his unconventional approaches to negotiation had earned him both admirers and critics within the Human Alliance. "They're approaching," his security detail whispered. Roger straightened his back and took a deep breath as 5 winged figures appeared on the horizon. The Sky Riders were an imposing sight, each nearly 7 feet tall, with powerful wings spanning twice their height. Their skin tones ranged from deep bronze to pale gold, and elaborate tattoos marked their arms and faces, telling stories of lineage and accomplishment that Roger had studied but knew he could never fully comprehend. The delegation landed with practiced grace, powerful wings creating gusts that sent papers flying from the human aids folders. Their leader, an older female with silver streak hair and wings that shimmered with an iridescent blue, stepped forward. Elder Tayloria, Roger greeted her with the traditional Sky Rider gesture, right hand over his heart, then extended palm up. "We are honored by your presence." The elder's face remained impassive, but she returned the gesture. "The honor is mutual, Diplomat Kincaid. Though I must express surprise at the Human Alliance, sending one so young to speak of matters so old." Roger had anticipated this observation. "Sometimes fresh eyes can see past ancient shadows, Elder. I come with respect for your traditions, but hope for new possibilities." A slight nod was her only acknowledgement as she took her place in the ceremonial circle, her 4 companions, all clearly warriors based on their elaborate armor and watchful stances, positioning themselves strategically around the platform. Roger couldn't help but notice one of them in particular, a female warrior whose wings had the unusual coloration of deep crimson fading to gold at the tips. Unlike the others, whose expressions ranged from open hostility to careful neutrality, her golden eyes studied him with intense curiosity. Her armor, though elegant, bore the marks of battle, and a ceremonial dagger hung at her hip. Something about her bearing suggested authority beyond her apparent youth. "Before we begin," Elder Tayloria spoke, her voice carrying easily despite her soft tone, "I must ask your intentions, Diplomat Kincaid. What does the Human Alliance truly seek from these talks?" Roger took a moment to look each Sky Rider in the eye before beginning his carefully prepared address. "What we seek is not from you, but with you. For too long, our peoples have existed in a state of uneasy tolerance punctuated by conflict. The magnetic storms grow stronger each cycle. Resources grow scarcer. The skylands themselves shift and change. We have survived separately, but I believe we could thrive together." The red-winged warrior's posture shifted almost imperceptibly at his words. Roger continued, building his case methodically as he had rehearsed countless times. He spoke of shared challenges, of the futility of past conflicts, of the possibilities that cooperation could bring. The Sky Riders listened in stoic silence, giving away nothing of their thoughts. "The path forward," Roger said, approaching what he considered the most persuasive part of his address, "must be built on mutual understanding. This means acknowledging past wrongs on both sides. The Human Alliance formally recognizes the territorial violations of the Southern Archipelago 12 years ago and offers reparations in the form of A sudden movement caught his eye. The red-winged warrior had stepped forward, her wings flaring slightly. Elder Teloria gave her a sharp look, but the younger Sky Rider's eyes remained fixed on Roger. Determined not to be deterred, Roger continued, in the form of technological exchange and medical supplies. We believe that these offerings, along with our commitment to a new boundary treaty, demonstrate our sincere desire for a lasting peace that benefits. The rest of his sentence was lost to the wind as the red-winged warrior suddenly launched herself forward with astonishing speed. Before the human security team could even raise their weapons, she had wrapped her powerful arms around Roger's waist and thrust upward with mighty wings, tearing him away from the platform. "What are you?" Roger's shocked protest was whipped away by the rushing air as they climbed higher at dizzying speed. Below, he could hear shouting from both delegations, the humans calling for restraint, the Sky Riders apparently as surprised as anyone. The warrior's grip was like iron, holding him securely against her as they soared higher into the magnetic storm-streaked sky. Terror gripped Roger as he realized how completely at her mercy he was, hundreds of feet above the ground, with nothing between him and a fatal fall but the arms of someone he could only assume was his kidnapper or would-be assassin. "Release me immediately," he shouted over the wind. "This is a violation of diplomatic protocol. You're endangering everything we've worked for." The Sky Rider said nothing, her powerful wings beating steadily as she altered course, heading not toward the main Sky Rider settlements as Roger had expected, but toward the wild, uninhabited islands of the outer territories. Her face remained impassive, golden eyes focused ahead, giving no hint of her intentions. After what seemed an eternity of terrifying flight, she angled downward toward a small floating island barely large enough to hold a few trees and a rocky outcropping. With surprising gentleness, given her earlier aggression, she set Roger down on solid ground. The moment her arms released him, Roger scrambled away, putting a large boulder between them. His heart hammered in his chest, adrenaline making his hands shake as he assessed his situation. His earpiece was gone, lost in the journey. He had no weapon, no communications device, no way to call for help. He was entirely at the mercy of this warrior. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice steady and authoritative despite his fear. "Do you realize what you've done? You've single-handedly destroyed any chance for peace." The Sky Rider warrior stood watching him, her wings folded now but still imposing. Finally, she spoke, her voice lower and more melodic than he had expected. "My name is Amelia. I am First Wing to Elder Teloria and daughter of the war leader." This was not the explanation Roger had hoped for. "I don't care who you are. You've abducted a diplomatic envoy during a peace negotiation. That's an act of war where I come from." A small frown creased her brow. "Where you come from, words of peace hide hearts of conquest. I've seen your kind before, diplomat. You speak of cooperation while your eyes measure our lands and resources." "That's not true," Roger protested. "I genuinely want peace between our peoples." "Perhaps you do," Amelia conceded, her golden eyes studying him intensely. "But you're not the Human Alliance. You are merely its voice." Roger took a deep breath, trying to think clearly despite his precarious situation. "If you believe that, why bring me here instead of just killing me? And why act against your elder's wishes?" A brief flash of something like uncertainty crossed Amelia's face. "The elder sees only what is before her. I see what approaches on the horizon. And what is that exactly?" Instead of answering, Amelia suddenly tensed, her head turning sharply. "We cannot stay here. They will search the nearby islands first." "Good," Roger retorted. "I want to be found." Amelia's wings flared, an intimidating display that made Roger step back involuntarily. "If they find you now, you will die. There are those among both our peoples who would rather see blood spilled than peace achieved." Before Roger could process this cryptic warning, she moved toward him with that same astonishing speed. He tried to dodge, but she caught him easily, wrapping her arms around him once more. "No, wait." But his protest went unheeded as they were airborne again, climbing rapidly into the increasingly turbulent sky. As they flew, the magnetic storms intensified, veins of energy crackling between the scattered islands. Roger had studied the Skyland's unique environment extensively, but experiencing the full intensity of a magnetic storm from within, rather than from the safety of a shielded human settlement, was terrifying. Lightning-like energy arced dangerously close to them, making his hair stand on end. Amelia flew with remarkable skill, banking and diving to avoid the worst of the energy discharges. Despite his anger and fear, Roger couldn't help but be impressed by her navigation abilities. When a particularly violent energy burst exploded too close for comfort, she tucked her wings and rolled, shielding his body with her own. The gesture was unexpected enough to momentarily silence his protests. Why would she protect him if her intent was harm? They flew for what must have been hours, leaving behind the territories Roger was familiar with from his briefings. The Skylands became wilder, with strange floating formations of rock and crystal that Roger had never seen documented. Eventually, the magnetic storms began to subside, and the sky took on the deep violet hue of approaching night. Amelia finally descended toward a larger island dominated by a dense forest of twisted trees, unlike any Roger had seen before. At its center stood a stone structure that appeared to be an ancient temple or outpost of some kind, partially reclaimed by vegetation. She set him down more carefully this time, though Roger still stumbled slightly as his feet touched solid ground again. His legs felt wobbly after so long suspended in the air, and exhaustion was beginning to overtake the adrenaline that had kept him alert. "This place is safe," Amelia said, folding her wings. "We can rest here." "Safe from what?" Roger demanded. "The only danger I see is you." Amelia's expression darkened. "You understand nothing, human. If I meant you harm, your bones would already be scattered across the lower atmosphere." The blunt assessment was hard to argue with. Roger ran a hand through his wind-tangled hair, tried to think clearly. "Then explain it to me. Why have you brought me here? What do you want?" Amelia moved toward the stone structure, gesturing for him to follow. "First we rest. Then we talk." Roger hesitated, weighing his options. He could try to run, but where would he go? He had no means of navigation, no knowledge of these remote islands, and no way to return to familiar territory. Reluctantly, he followed her into the structure. Inside, the ancient building was surprisingly intact. A central chamber opened to the sky through a circular gap in the ceiling, while smaller adjoining rooms offered shelter from the elements. Amelia moved with familiarity through the space, retrieving stored items from niches in the walls, dried food, water containers, even bedding materials. "You've been here before," Roger observed. "This is a sacred place to my people," she replied. "A waypoint for those who undertake the journey of vision." Roger accepted the water container she offered, suddenly aware of how thirsty he was. "And is that what we're doing? A journey of vision?" "In a way," Amelia said cryptically. She busied herself building a small fire in a stone pit beneath the opening in the ceiling, the smoke rising up and away. As the fire's warmth began to chase away the chill of the high-altitude air, Roger found himself studying his captor more carefully. In the flickering light, the tattoos that adorned her arms and framed her face seemed to tell a story, one he couldn't read but sensed was significant. Her movements were efficient and graceful, even with her wings folded against her back. "Why me?" he finally asked, his voice quieter now. "Of all the human diplomats who have attempted negotiations, why take me?" Amelia looked up from the fire, her golden eyes reflecting the flames. "Because you are different. Your words, they carry conviction the others lacked. So you abducted me because you thought I might actually succeed?" Roger couldn't keep the incredulity from his voice. "I took you because your success or failure was never going to be determined at that platform," Amelia replied. "The forces working against peace had already determined the outcome." "What forces? What are you talking about?" Amelia was silent for a long moment, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. "There's a faction among my people, led by my father, the war leader, who believes coexistence with humans is impossible. They see only one path forward: your extinction before you can grow strong enough to pose a real threat. Roger's blood ran cold at the matter-of-fact way she described genocide. And a human alliance? You mentioned forces on both sides. Your military council has authorized a contingency plan. If diplomacy fails again, they will deploy the magnetic disruptors. Roger shook his head emphatically. No, that's not possible. Those weapons were theoretical, never developed. The civilian casualties would be acceptable, according to your General Hargrove. Amelia cut him off. The disruptors would destabilize the magnetic fields that keep our islands aloft. Most would fall slowly enough for humans to evacuate their settlements. My people would not be so fortunate. How could you possibly know this? Roger demanded, but even as he asked, a sinking feeling told him she was right. He had been excluded from certain military briefings, told they weren't relevant to his diplomatic mission. We have eyes and ears, even among your kind, Amelia said, just as you have spies among ours. Roger sat back against the stone wall, trying to process this information. If what she said was true, his mission had been a sham from the start, a public relations exercise while both sides prepared for war. If that's true, he said slowly, then why not tell your elder? Why resort to kidnapping me? The elder knows of the threats, but believes diplomacy still has a chance. My father's faction grows stronger daily. The elder's influence wanes. Amelia's voice grew softer. And there's something else. Something I have seen that others have not. The way she said this last part sent a strange chill down Roger's spine. What do you mean, Scene? Instead of answering directly, Amelia reached into a pouch at her waist and withdrew a small object. She held it out to him, a crystal about the size of a thumb, glowing with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. This is a vision stone, she explained. They form rarely in the hearts of the oldest islands, where the magnetic energies have compressed minerals for centuries. Roger made no move to take it. And what does it do? For most, it shows nothing but pretty lights. But for a few, those with the blood of the first flyers, it can show glimpses of what might be. You're talking about seeing the future, Roger said skeptically. Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. A hint of a smile touched Amelia's lips for the first time. Your disbelief changes nothing. 3 moon cycles ago, during my vision journey, the stone showed me a man speaking words of peace with truth in his heart. It showed destruction if he failed, and it showed me carrying him away into the sky. Roger stared at the pulsing crystal, then at Amelia's face. Her expression was so earnest, so certain, that for a moment he almost believed her. But then his rationality reasserted itself. That's convenient, he said carefully. A vision that tells you exactly what to do, with no proof required. Amelia closed her hand around the crystal, her expression hardening. I risk everything by doing this. My position, my honor, perhaps my life. If I simply wished you harm, there are far easier ways. Her logic was sound, even if her claims of prophetic visions weren't. Roger sighed, fatigue making his thoughts sluggish. Let's say I believe you about the military plans on both sides. What exactly do you think we could do about it? We're 2 people alone in the wilderness. Sometimes 2 is enough to change the course of history, Amelia said, her voice taking on a lyrical quality that suggested she was quoting something. Rest now. Tomorrow's journey will be difficult. Roger wanted to argue further, to demand more answers, but exhaustion overwhelmed him. The last thing he saw before closing his eyes was Amelia silhouetted against the night sky, visible through the ceiling opening, her wings partially extended as if embracing the stars. The dream came to him in fragments, falling through endless sky, the screams of thousands as islands plummeted from the heavens, Amelia's wings burning as she tried to save him. He woke with a gasp, disoriented until the events of the previous day came rushing back. Early morning light filtered through the ceiling opening. Amelia was gone, but a small portion of dried food had been left beside him. Cautiously, Roger explored the ancient structure, finding it empty. He considered attempting to escape, but remembered Amelia's warning about the dangers of traveling alone in this unfamiliar territory. Instead, he ventured just outside, where a small spring bubbled up among the rocks. As he knelt to drink, the sound of powerful wing beats announced Amelia's return. She landed gracefully nearby, carrying something in her arms. "Here," she said, holding out a bundle of fabric. "Your human clothing is impractical for our journey." Roger accepted the offering, a lightweight garment similar to what the Sky Riders wore beneath their armor, designed to accommodate their wings but adaptable for a wingless human. "Where did you get this?" This outpost was once used for training young warriors. "Supplies remain." She turned away as he changed, giving him an unexpected moment of privacy. The clothing fit reasonably well and was far more comfortable than his formal diplomatic attire. "Our journey where, exactly?" Roger asked as he adjusted the unfamiliar garments. "To the heart of storms," Amelia replied, "where we will find proof you can take back to your people." "Proof of what?" "Of the true threat to all who dwell in the Skylands." She gestured to the horizon, where dark clouds gathered. "We must move quickly. A storm approaches." Before Roger could press for more details, Amelia had gathered their minimal supplies and gestured for him to come closer. With resignation, he allowed her to wrap her arms around him once more, and they were airborne. This time, the flight felt different. Perhaps it was the clothing, which protected him better from the rushing wind, or perhaps it was the growing realization that Amelia truly believed she was saving him, not harming him. Regardless, he found himself studying the landscape below with genuine curiosity rather than fear. The islands they passed grew increasingly strange, some barren rock, others teeming with bizarre vegetation unlike anything in the inhabited territories. Occasionally, creatures resembling birds but with reptilian features swooped past them, regarding the travelers with ancient eyes. "Sky serpents," Amelia explained when a particularly large specimen circled them curiously. "Usually harmless unless provoked. They nest on the unstable islands that humans and my people avoid." "I've never seen documentation of them," Roger said, fascinated despite himself. "Your kind rarely ventures beyond your settlements and trade routes. There is much of the Skylands you have not seen." As if to emphasize her point, they passed through a cloud bank and emerged before a breathtaking sight, a massive waterfall pouring from one floating island to another far below it, the water somehow flowing upward at the midpoint, defying gravity. "The magnetic fields affect water," Amelia explained, noting his amazement. "In places where the fields converge, strange things happen." They continued onward, the storm clouds growing closer. Roger noticed Amelia checking the position of the sun frequently, a crease of worry forming between her eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked. "We are being followed," she replied tersely. "Hold tight." Without warning, she banked sharply and dove toward a small cluster of islands below. Roger's stomach lurched at the sudden descent, but he bit back his protest, understanding the urgency in her movements. They landed in a dense thicket of vegetation, Amelia immediately pulling Roger into the shelter of broadleaf plants. "Stay down," she whispered, her body tense as she scanned the sky. Roger followed her gaze and saw what had concerned her, 3 winged figures in the distance, their flight pattern clearly one of search rather than travel. "Your people," he whispered. Amelia nodded grimly. "My father's warriors. They will not give up easily. What happens if they find us?" Her golden eyes met his, deadly serious. "They will kill you and bring me back for judgment." "And what would that judgment be?" "Death, most likely, for betraying my people by helping a human." The matter-of-fact way she stated this sent a chill through Roger. "Why risk it, then? Why help me at all?" Amelia's gaze returned to the sky, tracking their pursuers. "Because some truths transcend loyalty to one people. What I have seen in the Vision Stone threatens all who live in the Skylands, human and Sky Rider alike." The searchers drew closer, forcing them deeper into the vegetation. As they crouched in hiding, Roger found himself acutely aware of Amelia's presence. The subtle scent of her skin, like thunderstorms and wild herbs, the controlled rhythm of her breathing, the slight tremor in her wings that betrayed her tension. "They're landing on the main island," she whispered. "We need to move to the far side while they search." Together they crept through the dense foliage, Roger following Amelia's lead and placing his feet to avoid making noise. He noticed how naturally she moved through this wild environment, so different from the formal warrior he had briefly observed at the diplomatic meeting. They reached the edge of the small island, where a narrow gap separated them from the next floating landmass in the cluster. For Sky Riders, such gaps were meaningless, but for Roger, it represented an impassable chasm. Without discussion, Amelia wrapped an arm around his waist, spread her wings just enough for a short glide, and carried him across. They repeated this process from island to island, moving perpendicular to the search pattern of their pursuers. During one such crossing, a powerful gust from the approaching storm caught them mid-flight. Amelia compensated quickly but had to land awkwardly, sending them both tumbling onto soft moss. Roger found himself momentarily pinned beneath her, her wings creating a canopy above them, her face inches from his own. For a suspended moment, neither moved. Roger became acutely aware of the strength in her body, the otherworldly beauty of her features up close, the depth in her golden eyes as they studied his face with equal intensity. Then, with a fluid movement, she rolled away and was on her feet again, offering a hand to help him up. Roger accepted it, trying to ignore the lingering warmth where their bodies had pressed together. "The storm is moving faster than I anticipated," Amelia said, looking at the dark clouds now much closer. "We need to find better shelter." They continued their island-hopping retreat until the searchers were no longer visible. By then, the storm's outer bands had reached them, wind whipping the vegetation and carrying the scent of ozone. There, Amelia pointed to a larger island with a rocky outcropping. "We can wait out the worst of it there." The sky darkened rapidly as they made their way to the sheltered side of the rocks. Rain began to fall, heavy drops that seemed to sizzle with latent energy. As they huddled in the makeshift shelter, lightning cracked across the sky in patterns unlike any storm Roger had seen from the safety of human settlements. "Magnetic storms are different out here," Amelia explained, noting his fascination. "Without the stabilizing technology your people use, or the natural adaptations of Sky Rider dwellings, they show their true nature." "Beautiful and terrifying," Roger murmured. Like much of life, Amelia agreed, a hint of that rare smile touching her lips. As the storm intensified, they pressed deeper into the rocky shelter. Despite the natural protection, rain still found its way to them, soaking their clothing. The temperature dropped sharply, a common effect of the severe magnetic storms that swept the Skylands. Roger tried to suppress a shiver, but Amelia noticed. Without comment, she moved closer and, after a moment's hesitation, extended one wing to create a shelter around him. The gesture was oddly intimate, and Roger understood instinctively that this was not something Sky Riders did casually. "Thank you," he said quietly. Amelia nodded, her eyes on the storm. "We share body heat for survival. It is practical," but there was something in her voice that suggested it was more than mere practicality. As they sat together, the storm raging around them, Roger found himself studying her profile, the proud line of her jaw, the slight furrow of concentration between her brows, the way her crimson and gold feathers caught what little light remained. "You said your father is the war leader," he said, breaking the companionable silence. "That must have created expectations for you." Amelia was quiet for so long that Roger thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he had heard before. "Since I first grew my flight feathers, I was trained for battle. The history of conflict with humans was my lullaby. I became what was expected, first wing to the elder, pride of the war leader, destined to lead our warriors when the time came. Yet here you are, helping a human diplomat against your father's wishes." Her wing shifted slightly, drawing him closer as a particularly violent gust sent rain spraying into their shelter. "The vision stone showed me a different path. At first, I refused to believe it. I argued with the visions, meditated for days, seeking a different truth. But you came to believe it was real. I came to understand that some truths are larger than the stories we tell ourselves. She turned to look at him directly. Your people tell stories about mine, that we are savages, bloodthirsty, incapable of reason. My people tell stories about yours, that you are cruel, greedy, destructive. Both contain seeds of truth within their falsehoods. Roger nodded slowly, and both ignore the complexity of individuals. Yes, there was approval in her voice. This is why the Vision Stone showed me you, I think. Because you see beyond the stories. The storm reached its peak intensity, magnetic energy creating ghostly auroras that danced across the sky despite the heavy clouds. In that ethereal light, huddled together against the elements, Roger felt something shift between them, a fragile trust taking root. As the long night wore on, they shared stories in quiet voices. Roger spoke of growing up in the Human Alliance's floating cities, his fascination with the Sky Riders that had led him to diplomacy, his genuine belief that their peoples could find common ground. Amelia told him of Sky Rider traditions, the coming-of-age flight that every young warrior undertook, the ancient songs that mapped the changing skylands. By the time the storm began to abate in the early hours of the morning, something fundamental had changed. They were no longer captor and captive, but reluctant allies united by a common goal, even if Roger still wasn't entirely clear what that goal was. They slept briefly as the storm passed, Amelia's wings still protectively extended over Roger. When they woke, the sky had cleared to a crystalline blue, the floating islands around them glistening with raindrops that caught the light like countless tiny prisms. The heart of storms will be accessible now, Amelia said as they gathered their few belongings. The pathways realign after major magnetic events. You still haven't told me exactly what we're looking for, Roger pointed out. Amelia secured their supplies. Because you would not believe me without seeing it. Some truths must be witnessed. Once again, they took to the air, but this time Roger felt almost comfortable in Amelia's arms, trusting her strength and skill as they navigated the transformed landscape. The magnetic storm had shifted the positions of many smaller islands, creating new configurations in the ever-changing archipelago. They flew deeper into territory unknown to humans, where the magnetic fields grew increasingly erratic. Several times they had to shelter briefly as waves of energy washed over them, making Amelia's wings tremble with the effort of maintaining their course. Finally, they approached what appeared to be a massive storm cloud that remained stationary despite the prevailing winds. Its interior pulsed with energy, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating bizarre structures within. The heart of storms, Amelia announced as they circled at a safe distance. The oldest and most powerful magnetic nexus in the Skylands. Roger stared in awe at the swirling mass of energy. It's beautiful, but how do we enter it safely? We follow the pathways. Amelia pointed to barely perceptible currents in the cloud structure, subtle patterns that Roger would never have noticed without her guidance. She adjusted her flight, approaching the massive formation cautiously. As they drew closer, Roger could feel the energy prickling against his skin, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. Amelia's wings seemed to glow slightly, the magnetic fields interacting with something in her feathers. Sky Riders can sense the safe passages, she explained. It is in our nature, our bodies. This is why my people have survived here when others perished. They entered the outer layers of the vast cloud, visibility dropping to almost nothing. Roger held tight to Amelia, trusting her completely now as she navigated by senses he did not possess. Occasionally, the clouds would thin enough to reveal glimpses of astonishing sights. Floating crystals larger than islands, energy formations that resembled living organisms, debris from ancient civilizations suspended in the magnetic field. There have been others before us, Roger realized aloud. Other peoples who lived in the Skylands. Many, Amelia confirmed. Some rose and fell before my ancestors first took flight. Others existed alongside us for a time. All eventually disappeared. What happened to them? Instead of answering, Amelia angled downward. We are here. The clouds parted to reveal an enormous hollow space at the center of the storm, a sphere of relative calm within the chaos. At its center floated what at first appeared to be a small island. As they drew closer, Roger realized it was artificial, a construct of metal and crystal unlike anything he had seen in either human or Skyrider architecture. They landed on a platform that extended from the main structure. Now that his feet were on solid ground, Roger could feel subtle vibrations running through the entire construct. "What is this place?" he asked in hushed tones. "The ancients called it the Heart Keeper," Amelia replied, leading him toward an opening in the structure's side. "It maintains the balance of the magnetic fields that keep the Skylands aloft." Inside, the structure opened into a vast chamber filled with pulsing crystalline columns and humming machinery of incomprehensible design. Energy flowed visibly between components, creating a web of light throughout the space. "This is impossible," Roger breathed, trying to process what he was seeing. Technology this advanced. It would have to be thousands of years old. "Older," Amelia confirmed, from before the upheaval that created the Skylands. She led him deeper into the chamber, toward a central console covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Above it hovered a three-dimensional projection of the entire Skyland archipelago, thousands of islands represented in perfect miniature, connected by pulsing lines of force. "The Heartkeeper maintains the magnetic fields," Amelia explained. "Without it, the islands would fall. All would return to the surface, a surface that can no longer support life." Roger stared at the projection, understanding dawning. The magnetic disruptors. They wouldn't just affect Sky Rider territory. They would destabilize the entire system, Amelia confirmed grimly, beginning a cascade failure that would eventually bring down all the Skylands. "But surely our scientists would have predicted this," Roger protested, though doubt crept into his voice. "Would they? Has any human ever ventured this deep into the heart of storms? Has any human studied the ancient technology that keeps us all alive?" Roger had no answer. The Human Alliance's knowledge of the magnetic phenomena that supported the Skylands was limited to observations and theories. They had developed their stabilizing technology through trial and error, never fully understanding the natural systems they were interacting with. "And your people?" he asked. "Do the Sky Riders know about this place?" "Only a few," Amelia admitted. "Those who have undertaken the vision journey and been shown the way. We are caretakers, not creators. We maintain what we can, but much of the ancients' knowledge has been lost." Roger approached the console cautiously. "And this is your proof? This place? Not just the place." Amelia touched a sequence of symbols on the console. The projection shifted, zooming in on a section of the Human Alliance territory. Red warnings flashed around several islands. "These are the locations where your military has begun installing the magnetic disruptors," she said. "Already they caused disturbances in the fields. Small now, but growing." Roger recognized the locations, ostensibly civilian research stations that had been established in the past year. He had been told they were studying weather patterns. "How do I know this isn't some elaborate deception?" he asked, though his doubt was fading rapidly. "A Sky Rider trick to prevent us from developing new technology?" In answer, Amelia touched another sequence. A historical record began to play above the console. Images of floating islands falling from the sky, civilizations collapsing as their homes plummeted toward the uninhabitable surface. The record showed multiple occurrences across centuries, each time triggered by attempts to manipulate the magnetic fields beyond certain parameters. "The ancients left warnings," Amelia said quietly. "Each time, someone believes they know better. Each time, they are wrong." Roger watched in horror as the historical record played out disaster after disaster. "I had no idea. This changes everything. This is why I brought you here," Amelia said. "Not as a captive, but as a witness. Someone must speak the truth to both our peoples before it is too late." Roger turned to her, seeing her not as a Sky Rider warrior now, but as a person of incredible courage and conviction. "You risked everything to show me this." "Some truths are worth the risk," she replied simply. A sudden alarm blared from the console, startling them both. The projection shifted, showing multiple winged figures approaching the heart of storms. "They've found us," Amelia said, her expression darkening. "Sooner than I expected." "Your father's warriors?" She nodded grimly. "They will be here within minutes. We must leave now." "Wait," Roger said, studying the console. "Is there a way to record this information? Something I can take back as proof?" Amelia hesitated, then reached for a crystal embedded in the console. With a quick motion, she extracted it and handed it to Roger. "This contains the historical records and current data, but will mean nothing if we don't survive to deliver it." They hurried back through the structure toward the landing platform. As they emerged, they could already see the approaching figures, 8 warriors in full battle armor. "Too late," Amelia murmured. "They're between us and the only safe exit path." Roger clutched the crystal, its importance suddenly overwhelming. "What do we do?" Amelia's expression hardened with resolve. "I fight. You hide." She pointed to a recess in the structure's exterior. "Stay there until it's over." "I won't leave you to face them alone," Roger protested. "This is not your battle," she insisted. "It became my battle the moment you carried me off that platform," Roger countered. "Whatever happens now, we face it together." Something flickered in Amelia's golden eyes. Surprise, respect, perhaps something deeper. After a moment, she nodded. "Stand behind me then. But if I fall, take the crystal and find another way out." The warriors landed on the platform in a formation that spoke of military discipline. Their leader, a massive male with steel-gray wings, stepped forward. The resemblance to Amelia was unmistakable, the same proud bearing, the same intensity in his golden eyes. "Daughter," he greeted her, his voice cold. "You disgrace your lineage with this treachery." Amelia stood tall, her wings slightly extended in a posture that was both defensive and defiant. "Father, you disgrace our people's sacred duty as caretakers by pursuing war." The war leader's eyes flicked to Roger, contempt evident. "You bring a human to the Heartkeeper? The punishment for such sacrilege is death." "He comes as a witness, not an intruder," Amelia replied steadily. "The human disruptors threaten all the Skylands. I have shown him the truth, so he may return to his people and prevent catastrophe." A murmur ran through the warriors behind the war leader. Roger noticed that not all seemed as certain as their commander. "Convenient," the war leader sneered. "A story to justify your fascination with human ways. I had hoped to bring you back for proper judgment, but I see now that your corruption runs too deep." He drew his ceremonial blade, its edge glinting with an unnatural blue light. "I will end this shame myself." "Father, please." Amelia's voice held pain, but not fear. "See the truth before it's too late." "The only truth I need is before me," he replied, advancing slowly. "A daughter who betrays her people deserves no mercy." Roger stepped out from behind Amelia, ignoring her attempt to keep him. "Back, war leader. I understand your anger, but what your daughter has shown me changes everything. The disruptors my people are developing will destroy all the Skylands, not just Sky Rider territory." "Silence, human," the war leader snarled. "Your words mean nothing here." "But the ancients' warnings should," Roger persisted, holding up the crystal. "This contains historical records of previous attempts to manipulate the magnetic fields. Each ended in catastrophe." One of the other warriors, an older female with silvered wings, spoke up hesitantly. "War leader, perhaps we should examine the evidence. If there is any truth to this." "There is no truth except our strength and their weakness," the war leader cut her off. "Stand firm or stand aside, second wing." Roger recognized a critical division forming among the warriors. Not all shared their leader's absolute certainty. He pressed the advantage. "Your duty is to protect your people. At least consider the possibility that the greatest threat may not be from humans, but from forces neither of us fully understands." The war leader's patience snapped. With a roar of rage, he lunged forward, blade aimed at Roger's heart. Amelia moved with blinding speed, deflecting her father's attack with her own dagger, which she had drawn in a flash of movement too quick for Roger to follow. "You would strike down an unarmed diplomat?" she challenged, her voice ringing with authority that belied her younger years. "What honor is there in that, father?" The warriors behind the war leader stirred uncomfortably. Skyrider Honor Code was strict about combat with those unable to defend themselves. "He is a threat to our very existence," the war leader growled, but doubt had entered his voice. "No," Amelia replied firmly. "He is our best hope for survival." She turned to address the other warriors directly. "All of you have undertaken the vision journey. All of you have seen glimpses of truth beyond our daily understanding. I ask you now, does your heart tell you that more bloodshed is the path to our people's salvation?" A tense silence followed her words. The older female warrior, Second Wing, was the first to lower her weapon slightly. The First Wing speaks with conviction. "Our tradition demands we at least hear the evidence." One by one, the other warriors indicated agreement, until only the war leader stood resolute in his hostility. Seeing his authority wavering, he switched tactics. "Very well," he said, though his eyes still burned with anger. "Let us examine this supposed evidence. But the human remains our captive until we determine the truth." It wasn't ideal, but it was better than open combat. Roger nodded his acceptance of these terms, and Amelia, after a moment's consideration, did the same. They returned inside the ancient structure, the warriors forming a loose circle around Roger and Amelia as they approached the central console. The war leader watched with barely contained skepticism as Amelia inserted the crystal, bringing up the historical records once more. For nearly an hour, they reviewed the evidence, catastrophic failures of previous civilizations, technical data showing the current disturbances in the magnetic fields, projections of system collapse if the disruptions continued. Throughout, the war leader remained stone-faced, but the other warriors showed increasing concern. "If this is true," Second Wing finally said, "then war with humans would solve nothing. Even if we destroyed their settlements, the disruptors already in place could trigger a cascade failure. And if we help them understand the danger," another warrior added, "perhaps their technology could be repurposed to strengthen the fields rather than disrupt them." The war leader looked from face to face, seeing his absolute authority slipping away. With a sudden movement born of desperation, he lunged for the console, attempting to destroy the evidence. "Lies! All lies!" Amelia intercepted him, the two locked in a struggle that sent them crashing against the ancient machinery. Energy surged erratically through the chamber, the delicate balance of the Heartkeeper disrupted by their combat. "Stop!" Roger shouted, understanding the danger. "You'll damage the system." But the war leader was beyond reason, his rage and fear driving him to lash out at the daughter, who challenged everything he believed. He struck Amelia a powerful blow that sent her reeling back against a crystal column. As the column cracked, a wave of energy burst forth, knocking everyone to the ground. Alarm signals blared throughout the chamber. The projection above the console showed cascading disruptions spreading outward from the heart of storms. "What have you done?" Second Wing demanded of the war leader, horror in her voice. Roger scrambled to the console, studying the symbols as best he could with his limited understanding. "The damage is spreading. If it reaches the outer layers of the heart, it could destabilize the entire magnetic field network." Amelia pushed herself to her feet, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "There's a protocol for this. The ancients built safeguards." She joined Roger at the console, her fingers moving across the symbols with practiced precision. "But it requires tremendous energy to activate." "What kind of energy?" Roger asked. Her golden eyes met his, intense and sorrowful. "Life energy. A conscious sacrifice." Before Roger could process this, the war leader spoke, his voice transformed from the arrogance of moments before. "I was wrong," he said quietly, blinded by fear and pride. "The evidence is clear." He stepped forward, looking not at Amelia or Roger, but the cascading failure displayed in the projection. A leader who brings his people to the brink of destruction does not deserve to lead. He turned to his daughter, regret etched deeply in features so similar to her own. But perhaps he can still save them. Understanding dawned on Amelia's face. "Father, no." There must be another way. There isn't time, he replied with newfound calm. You know this as well as I. He looked to Roger. Human, if you survive this, tell your people the truth. Make my sacrifice mean something. Before anyone could stop him, the war leader placed his hands on two crystal pillars that pulsed with unstable energy. Activate the protocol, he commanded Amelia. Now, daughter, do your duty to all our peoples. Tears streaming down her face, Amelia entered a complex sequence on the console. The pillars glowed brilliantly, energy flowing visibly from the war leader's body into the system. His face contorted in pain, but he remained steadfast, his eyes locked with his daughter's in a final moment of understanding that transcended their differences. With a blinding flash and a sound like thunder, the energy surge stabilized, flowing back into orderly patterns throughout the Heartkeeper. The war leader collapsed, his body smoking slightly from the massive energy transfer. Amelia ran to him, cradling his head. For a brief moment, his eyes opened, clarity and peace replacing the anger that had driven him for so long. I see it now, he whispered. The vision. You were right. Then his eyes closed for the final time. A profound silence fell over the chamber. The surviving warriors knelt beside their fallen leader, honoring his sacrifice despite the conflict that had preceded it. Roger stood apart, respecting their grief, understanding that a fundamental shift had occurred in Sky Rider leadership and belief. Eventually, Second Wing rose and approached Roger. The war leader's last command was to share the truth. As acting leader until the Elder confirms a successor, I intend to honor that command. Roger nodded solemnly. As do I. My people need to understand what's at stake. Amelia joined them, her face composed despite the tears that had fallen. We should return immediately. Both our peoples must cease actions that threaten the fields while we develop a joint approach to strengthening the Heartkeeper. The journey back was somber but united in purpose. The warriors who had come as enemies now flew as escorts, forming a protective formation around Amelia and Roger. They carried not only the body of the war leader for proper ceremonial honors, but also the crystal containing the vital evidence. When they reached the human settlement where the diplomatic mission had begun, chaos erupted at their arrival. Human security forces scrambled to defensive positions, while communications officers frantically contacted the Alliance leadership. Ambassador Coleman rushed forward as Roger was set down gently by Amelia. Kincaid, where in heaven's name have you been? We thought you were dead. The entire peace process collapsed when that creature abducted you. Roger stood tall, Amelia at his side. Ambassador, I need to speak to the full council immediately. What I've learned changes everything we thought we knew about the Skylands and our future here. You can't possibly expect, Coleman began, but Roger cut him off. The magnetic disruptors must be deactivated immediately. They're destabilizing the entire Skyland system. Coleman's face paled. How do you know about those? That's classified at the highest level. I know because I've seen the evidence of what they're doing, Roger replied firmly. And the Sky Riders have agreed to share ancient knowledge that could help us strengthen the magnetic fields instead of weakening them. Preposterous, Coleman sputtered. You've clearly been brainwashed or coerced. Second Wing stepped forward, her imposing presence silencing the ambassador. The war leader gave his life to prevent catastrophe. We bring his body home with honor, but also with a new understanding. The human speaks truth. Over the next several hours, as Elder Tayloria arrived with her delegation and emergency communications were established with the human Alliance Council, Roger and Amelia presented their evidence, the historical records, the technical data, and their first-hand account of the Heartkeeper's function and importance. Initial skepticism gave way to concern, then to acceptance as human scientists analyzed the data from the crystal and confirmed its implications. The disruptors were indeed causing growing instabilities in the magnetic field network, just as the ancient records had warned. 3 days later, a formal ceremony marked the beginning of a new era. On the same platform where Roger had been abducted mid-sentence, he now stood completing that interrupted speech, but with a very different message. The path forward must be built on mutual understanding, he said, looking out at the mixed audience of humans and Skyriders. Not just between our peoples, but between all who dwell in the Skylands and the remarkable environment that sustains us. We are not masters of these floating islands, but their caretakers, a responsibility we now understand we share. Beside him stood Amelia, formally recognized as the new war leader, though she had already begun discussions about renaming the position to Guardian of the Skies. Their shoulders nearly touched as they faced their peoples together. The new treaty was unlike any previous attempt at peace. Beyond establishing borders and trade agreements, it created a joint council to monitor the magnetic fields and established research teams of humans and Skyriders working together to understand and preserve the ancient technology of the Heartkeeper. As the formal proceedings concluded and the delegations dispersed for the celebratory feast, Roger found a moment alone with Amelia on the edge of the platform, looking out at the sunset, painting the scattered islands in gold and crimson hues that matched her wings. "When you carried me off that day," he said quietly, "did you truly know it would lead to this?" Amelia's wings shifted slightly, a gesture he had come to recognize as thoughtfulness. The vision stone showed possibilities, not certainties. "I saw destruction if I did nothing. I saw hope if I acted. And us?" Roger asked, his voice softer still. "Did you see us?" She turned to him then, those remarkable golden eyes meeting his with an intensity that still took his breath away. "The stone showed me carrying you into the sky. It showed me claiming you as mine, though I didn't understand what that meant until later." Roger smiled, remembering their tumultuous journey. "Claim me mid-air, did you?" "Perhaps," she replied, that rare smile transforming her face. "Or perhaps you claimed me. Does it matter who claimed whom, when the result is the same?" In answer, Roger closed the small distance between them. Among the Skyriders, wings were not merely appendages but expressions of emotion, used in intimate communication. He had learned enough of their ways now to gently touch the edge of her wing with reverent fingers, a gesture of profound trust and affection. Amelia's breath caught at the contact. Then, slowly, she enfolded him in her wings, creating a private world that blocked out everything but the two of them. In the dying light, with the skylands spread out beneath them, their lips met in a kiss that bridged worlds. They had no illusions that the path ahead would be easy. Centuries of mistrust would not vanish overnight. The technical challenges of preserving the magnetic fields would require years of dedicated work. Some on both sides still harbored doubts and resentments. But as they stood together at the edge of infinity, the winged woman who had carried him off mid-sentence and the diplomat who had found courage in the endless sky, they shared a certainty that transcended all doubts. Together, they had changed the course of history. Together, they would face whatever came next. The magnetic storms still raged across the Skylands, beautiful and terrifying as Amelia had once described them. But now, instead of harbingers of conflict, they represented the dynamic, ever-changing nature of a world where humans and Skyriders had finally found common ground, not despite their differences, but because of what those differences could accomplish when united in common purpose. And high above, in the heart of storms, the ancient Heartkeeper continued its eternal vigil, its energies flowing more smoothly now as two peoples worked in harmony to understand and protect the remarkable world they shared.